Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Definitely. So can you explain to us what role a state senator plays in governing North Carolina?
Sure. I can tell you let me start by telling you kind of what we do day in and day out. There's a long session and a short session, and during that time we introduce bills, and then those bills, if they pass through the Senate, they'll go over to the House, and then if they pass through the House, they get signed by the governor and they become laws. So that's kind of what you traditionally think about when you think about a legislator or a state senator. Right. But one of the more important things that a state senator does is they provide leadership in a lot of different ways. So it's not really just about passing bills, it's about getting people to work together and coordinate to do good things for your community, whether it's in the way of economic development and recruiting, or if you're working on broader issues like mental health, bringing people together to find good solutions.
Okay.
And then finally, one of the most important things we do is constituent relations. We help people navigate through state government when they have issues, and we try and really help them get answers to some of the questions and problems that they have. I actually started to run for public office back in the mid-2000s when I ran for the Board of Education.
Okay.
So education is really where it started for us. My wife and I have 4 children, and that's how we really got into it at that time. Because education is really so intertwined with everything else, with jobs, right. Crime, poverty. Education is really the common link, and if we can address a lot of our education issues and problems that we have, especially early on in a child's life, we can really impact their whole life.
Mr. Barnhill, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks
Awesome.
for the invitation.
So, what brought you to run for NC State Senate?
Well, I'm a native of Wilmington, and my family's been here for generations. But over the past 5 or 6 years, I've started to watch the General Assembly in Raleigh really kind of shortchange those of us here in southeastern North Carolina. And I began to see that New Hanover County really needed some strong advocacy and representation in Raleigh. And so I was encouraged by many people from the community to consider running for it, and that's how we got started. So one of the goals when in the state legislature is first to bring back our film incentive here in New Hanover County. That was one of the largest economic supporters of jobs here in this community. And in fact, we just saw an article this week from WECT that reported that Screen Gem Studios isn't producing anything right now. We've got to be cognizant of the industries that support the families here in Wilmington and New Hanover County, and that's one example of that. In addition, I think we need to be paying close attention to what we're doing to support our public schools, from higher education all the way down to pre-kindergarten. I know we've seen, and my opponent has certainly mentioned, the efforts to try to increase teacher salaries, which is important, but we also have to be really careful to make sure that we are working to protect our teachers and work for our teachers on a regular basis and not just during election year.
Another key thing for what I'm interested in is economic development and jobs. Creating an environment where the private sector can really thrive from a job creation and increasing the average weekly wage for employees. I think that's really a big crux of what government can do. It can essentially kind of get out of the way.
Right.
And so that's some of the things that we really look at and work on.
Well, certainly one of the things that we need to do that's drawing a lot of attention right now is we need to repeal HB2. Regardless of what one's initial thoughts were about the legislation, we're seeing how much it's draining from our economy. We've lost about $395 million to where we are right now in September from North Carolina in revenue that will be coming in as a result of this harmful piece of legislation. So we need to work together with both chambers to make sure that we repeal it.
HB2 is, for me, was a bill about privacy rights. So take a step back. Charlotte passed an ordinance.
Right.
And that ordinance said that every private business had to essentially not discriminate based on gender identity, and yet, or gender expression. And they didn't define those terms. So what House Bill 2 did was it said, as to all state buildings, didn't require anything of private businesses. If you had a multi-occupancy changing room, bathroom facility, that you had to designate by biological sex, how anatomically. And the only way to determine that is through your birth certificate. HB2 was not a comment or judgment on any particular community in North Carolina. My vote was really based on privacy concerns.
I think, as we were talking about beforehand, it's much easier for younger people to pay attention to the national races because they see it on social media and everywhere they go. But one of the things that we have done is involve so many young people from around the community in the actual work of the campaign as volunteers, which has given them a chance to say, hey, this is a race that I can really make a difference in. And I think the more that we do that as candidates and elected officials, the more that we draw attention to local and state politics, which is healthier for all of us.
I think being engaged in middle school and high school and really developing an understanding and appreciation for the process.
Right.
If we could spend more time in the middle grades and high school, I really think that we would be much more successful in younger people being engaged as they go through college and even in their early to mid-20s.